Greetings, Starfighter. You are about to listen to the totally super awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast. Always remember, no matter where you go, there you are. Ready Player One.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another fun episode of 80s Reboot Overdrive. Once again, this is Jesse. I'm in the driver's seat, but this time Dave is hanging with us. And I don't know how he's not comfortable enough to let me drive his car, but he is. So tell everyone hi, Dave.
Well, as my friend from Orc would say, nanu nanu.
And we have Lou.
Hey, believe it or not, I'm floating on air.
Oh, nice.
And, Lou's getting to be a pretty regular visitor on the bus. Or should I say the spaceship.
Yes.
And
the magic school bus.
Yes, and we have Scott.
Yeah, hello, everybody. How is that? I got nothing. You guys took all the good lines.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Wait. I'm sorry. Don't call me Scott. Call me Gordon Shumway.
Okay. I should make some kind of Kit reference or something.
No, here's what you do.
Elsewhere.
Do oh boy for
oh boy, that is perfect. Yeah. Yes.
Oh yeah, awesome.
That is what I should have done. Ziggy. Yes, we are here for our second part. You listeners demanded it. Or at least one person said, hey, shouldn't this be continued? We're going to talk about more TV shows, genre shows in the 80s. If you haven't listened to the earlier episode, please go back and listen to it. We covered wonderful things like the miniseries, Buck Rogers, Alien Nation, and we had a blast. And so we're going to start out now. And just to kind of give you the rules again, our thought is any show that started that had episodes in the 80s. So like Buck Rogers started in 79, but it went to 81, and Doctor Who started in 63, but it kept going to 89. So we are going to one of my favorite shows, Quantum Leap, as we just talked about. Oh boy. Debuted in 1989, lasted to 1993, and I remember seeing an interview with the president of NBC saying that he thought it was a mistake that he canceled it because it could have continued because it was such a wide range of stories you could tell. It really was an anthology series every week. And I felt for the set designers and the costumers because it was nothing set every time, right? Dave, why don't we start with you? Any thoughts about Quantum Leap? Memories?
I remember watching it. I remember liking it. But, I mean, there's just one that I think sticks with the wheelhouse of you guys because you wrapped up your Stephen King series. But wasn't there an episode where you met Stephen King?
Yes, there was. It was a young Stephen King. It was it was kind of an evil spirit. It was a really spooky one. I think it was, yeah. Yeah, I remember that episode. I remember him leaping and go to himself as a child and trying to save, his dad's life, by having him quit smoking and then they had the one where he went to Vietnam. A lot of great episodes. Anything else, Dave?
Well, I just had read somewhere that I heard Dean Stockwell had decided that he liked the idea of Al having a cigar all the time because he figured it would give him a bunch of free cigars.
I like that. That's a good idea. And it's true. He did. Lou, how about you?
Yeah, this is my favorite series from this decade. I just think it's kind of a mashup of like Touched by an Angel and kind of Indiana Jones. But I just think that Scott Bakula, who would later on play captain of Star Trek, this was a role of a lifetime for him, and he got to play so many different characters. And I just there's just sometimes a series just sort of really gets in a groove, and you guys have sort of touched upon it briefly, but I just love the episode where he left home and wanted to, because he knew the future of all his family members, and they all sort of had like crappy lives.
Yeah,
And he really wanted to save his dad from having a heart attack, and he wanted
Right.
to save his sister from getting into an abusive marriage.
Right.
And most of all, he wanted to save his brother from going to Vietnam. And
Right.
that scene where he, because his sister was a real John Lennon fan,
Yeah.
and where he sings "Imagine," and
Yeah.
and she starts crying because she knows that she's never heard this song yet, but she
Right.
knows that this is a John Lennon song. And he told her what happened to John Lennon, and she's like totally,
Yeah.
messed up. That was like, wow. I still get goosebumps when I watch that. And Scott Bakula was just so amazing. And then the next episode where he leaps into his brother in Vietnam, and it intersects with Al, who basically sacrifices himself and ends up in a prison, as a POW for a couple of years, and knowing that, saved his brother, or he could have tried to ask his brother to try to save him, but
Yeah.
they would have been ambushed, right?
I think the storyline, right, is that if I remember correctly, and now that I want to go dig these episodes up and watch them,
Yeah.
the idea was he changed the history enough to save his brother's life, but Al stayed in a prison camp even longer than he was going to.
Yeah.
I think that was it, though it may have been he wasn't a PFW the first time.
Oh, he was.
And-
But he made that because this Al knew, right,
Yes.
what his decision was going to cost him, but he still made that decision. So,
Yeah.
that show was in a groove during that time period. And there's a couple episodes where of course, the big one where he jumped into the black man,
Yes.
who drank from the water tap that he wasn't supposed to drink from. Another one where he jumped into a woman.
I remember reading the first time he jumped into a woman, everyone thought it was hilarious, and
Mhm.
everyone was on stage. And by the second or third time, he said no one cared anymore, that it wasn't that big of a deal. But
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, and one time he jumped into a handicapped person.
yes,
That was also a powerful episode. And another time he jumped into a test chimp for the space program.
yes,
The sad thing about that series is it's one of those series that because they didn't know ahead of time that they were going to get canceled, they really had to rush the ending. And while they sort of kept it open to a sequel or to be picked up later on, it was kind of an unsatisfying ending.
Hold
But,
that thought, because I have a hot Jesse opinion, a Jessitorial about that.
Okay, but I just
yeah.
loved him and Dean Stockwell. I thought they had
Yes.
great chemistry together. And,
Yes, and considering they had to do a lot of the heavy lifting,
yeah, and this is a series that could be rebooted and
easy.
redone today again, no problems.
If
And,
you had the right two leads, I totally agree
yeah,
with you. It's a
yeah.
great premise.
Yeah.
Scott, now we've drooled all over this and Totus. How about you?
Yeah, I didn't watch it regularly, but I
Yeah.
caught several episodes. I don't remember certain details of it, but I did enjoy the show. It was good. It was a good time. I mean, how can you not enjoy just jumping around from era to era and being able to be somebody else for a little while? I mean, you're like, yeah, man, that would be so cool to do that. But then some of the episodes that you guys are mentioning that I didn't catch sound like they could be really challenging, actually.
Yeah,
like mentally, emotionally challenging. You're like, wow, that would be really tough to be, the black man in a certain area when
Yes.
you're not allowed to drink from that fountain. I mean, that's hardcore.
Yeah, it was. And then they had episodes where, like I said, there was someone who was mentally challenged. Sam, landed into him. Premise was you could travel within your own lifetime. And that way it kept the special, the costumes and everything fairly, modern era.
Yep.
And they had Kisses with History, I think is what they called it, where, there was one where they waited. Sam was this farmer, and they were, working on this, trying to get things going. And there was this young guy. Charles, and he's with a guitar at the very end, and he's playing, and Al looks at, Sam and says, no. And, Sam goes, buddy, why don't you try Peggy? and he starts going, Peggy Sue, and that's when Sam leaped, and tons of fan fiction out there about Quantum Leap is a perfect show that you can write crossover fiction with anything.
Yeah.
And so absolutely wonderful. I truly despise the ending.
Mhm.
I thought they tried to do too much. With it, the guy from Animal's House was trying to be God, the bartender, and I would have been okay with it. They fix it so that Al didn't lose his wife. That there was one of the more powerful episodes was Sam goes back in time, and Al's first wife, a common thing in this show was Al was married multiple times, but his first wife, thought he died in prison camp, and she ended up moving on, and Sam was able to fix that. But then the very last thing you see is Sam Beckett never leaped home. And I think that's just a very unsatisfying ending, because the credits were every leap will be the leap home, and to think that they did that, I just don't think it was a service to the show, and I tend to not want to agree with that.
The only thing I think I would have liked it better in the show if it would have been a little more serialized.
Yeah.
Especially when we find out things about Sam that we didn't know until pretty well the last season. Because once you find that out, it's kind of like a real kick in the gut, and you go, "Oh my God, the poor guy." But you don't have a clue of that until then, right? But
and I mean, I think they showed that he ended up being married, and and there was, and I would have every once in a while they had an episode where you saw the modern era. And that was always special too. So absolutely one of my favorites, and I've been a Scott Bakula fan ever since.
Same here. Yeah, it's like the spiritual descendant of the Time Tunnel from the '60s, if you remember that show. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yes,
I think that would be a great role as an actor.
Definitely.
You'd be definitely challenged every episode to have to adjust your approach to things.
And I guess Scott Bakula had done some Broadway work, because he sang "Man of La Mancha" in one episode, and where he got to sing and perform. And I guess in fact, I think he may have done an album during Quantum Leap where he sang a couple of songs or something. So I do not watch CSI New Orleans, but I feel guilty every time I don't, because I just feel, it's doing fine without me, but I love Scott Bakula. He's
same here.
Great guy.
Yeah, apparently he did like song and dance stuff all the time on the set. During the run of the series. Yes. So it's just a fact. Like we're probably overblowing this series for people that aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, they're going enough.
Wow, I've never heard of this series. How good, but it has such a special chemistry. It has a special place in my heart, and I like it even more now, I think, today than I did when it was originally on.
Absolutely. So let's move to something else that was, I think people who didn't watch this when it first came out do not understand the cultural force, the hurricane tidal wave that Mork and Mindy was.
The birth of Robin Williams.
This was, I remember, I was a child, I graduated high school in 1977. I think it's funny that when you think about it, in 1975, it felt like the 50s was forever ago. It was only 20 years, at the time. Mm-hmm. But, I loved Happy Days, and I it was so cool. And Robin Williams was just a rock star. He was hilarious. He was funny. Mindy was sweet. And just the chaos of that show was something that you enjoyed all the time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that show is ad-lib, too. Well, at least, the Robin Williams part.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. And that's the legend, whether it's true or not.
Well, it's truth now because we put it on our podcast.
There we go. So how about you, Dave? Were you a Mork and Mindy fan?
I was a Mork and Mindy fan. Sitting in the upside down position, just the dialogue that he would have with Orson. And you guys remember the? Do you know how they picked that name?
I think it has to do something with Orson Bean or Orson Welles or something.
Orson Welles. Orson
Yeah, I
Welles.
know
So
they
it's-
wanted Orson Welles to do the voice, and they couldn't make it out. At least that is the rumor. Yeah, it is.
They'd picked it from the War of the Worlds radio series that
Yes.
Orson Welles had done. So that's how they
Yeah.
got the
Nice.
name Orson.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, it does.
But
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I mean, it was just very funny show. Just enjoyed watching it. I believe that there was a couple of nods to Star Trek because Robin Williams was a fan of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just
Well, I
trying.
know he had a hand signal, right?
Yeah, I think that
Right.
nanu hand signal
Yeah.
is sort of like
Yeah.
to live long and prosper.
Yeah,
Yes.
long live process. Yeah, and then the spacesuit was an earlier costume from I guess a episode of Star Trek called The Savage Curtain.
Oh, okay.
Ah, yes, that's correct. Yes.
Yes.
Colonel Tom Cochran, I think
Right.
it was.
Yeah,
Or
nice.
Colonel Green, that's what it was, yes.
Hmm. Lou, how about you?
Yeah, like you, Jesse, I was a big fan of Happy Days. Hey.
Hey.
But, this is C. Yeah, but,
And let's
Yeah,
not
when
jump the
Robin-
shark on the show now. Come on.
yeah, when Robin Williams came on that episode, or had his guest star appearances, I thought, it really caught the media at that. And again, we're back to the pre-internet days, but there was a lot of newspaper articles and whatnot about that appearance, and it was enough that it's set up this whole Mork and Mindy series, and it's kind of bittersweet now, especially
Yes.
considering how Robin Williams ended up, and it always floors me that comedians can be so able to make other people laugh, but yet it seems a lot of times they're in the inside, they're very unhappy people, and it's kind of bittersweet looking back on his career now, and especially this series, because he, like Jesse said, he was like a tsunami. And every time I saw him on a talk show appearance, whether it's Merv Griffin, Johnny Carson, or whatever, the guy could just start talking about plants or something, and it would go off on, it's just like he was insane, and he was so funny and so full of energy. And I just loved the show. I think the first season was the best, and unfortunately they decided to tinker with it in subsequent seasons, and I don't think it was quite as strong as the first season.
Right.
Man, he was just a force of nature, that guy, and it was just a really fun show to watch. I had tears in my eyes sometimes watching him.
Yeah, I remember that too. And by the way, on a side note, I have not seen this yet, but it's on my to-do list. Kevin Pollak did Misery Loves Comedy. That is a documentary that is exactly about that. He is interviewing comedians about their inner pain and why they try to, what they do about acts and what they're doing. And he told the story that Robin and him talked, but they never got it officially on the record so that Robin's part of it. But they certainly discussed that. And so, absolutely. Scott?
Yeah, fun show, and
Yes.
it was the furthest. It was the spin-off that I don't think anybody saw coming from Happy Days. I
Right.
mean,
Absolutely.
it is so polar opposite of.
Yeah, I mean,
it was just so bizarre that they would spin that off.
yeah,
I mean,
Laverne and Shirley is the same theme, and it makes sense, right?
even
But-
even Joni Loves Chachi is
Right.
obvious. I mean, you could tell they wanted to continue it on. Whatever. They had a following. Everybody wanted to see them
Yeah.
together, and that show was a disaster. But anyway, the Mork and Mindy, I loved it, and one of the things that I remember about it was Jonathan Winters coming on a few seasons, and I don't know how some people might not like that idea, but I would have loved to have been on the first set appearance of those two,
Yeah,
playing off each other the way they can, and because they're both just improv guys,
right.
they're just flying by the cuff, and they're just completely nuts.
Yeah,
and that's and you could have put a lot of comedians in that same role as Mork, and it would not have been as successful as it was, because he was so special in being just completely wacky and nutty, and he had this energy. That energy was
yes.
contagious. Absolutely. I mean, it's what drew you into his character, and so it was a blast to watch that show. Loved it.
Absolutely. So you both are a little younger than Lou and I. Did you have a Mork and Mindy lunch pail?
Oh, wait, I got better.
Yes.
I had the suspenders,
Very nice.
the rainbow suspenders that he wore. Yep, that's right.
So last year for Dragon Con, there was they had a day where they had a lot of people wearing rainbow suspenders, and they did a big picture of everyone wearing, rainbow suspenders, which was kind of nice.
Yeah, we had the khaki pants and the
Yes.
rainbow suspenders, and I know there's pictures of it somewhere.
Oh, you've got to share. You've got
And
to share.
if I can dig them up, I don't know. I don't know if I have anything digital.
Yeah.
So I'd have to see if maybe my sister has some or something like that, because that would be classic. It was me and my cousin. We were wearing them at the same time.
That is awesome.
It's so cheesy.
Yeah.
I mean, this had to be like 78, because that I would have been like 10 or 11 years old.
And
79.
in a lot of ways, Robin Williams was the gateway to me enjoying stand-up comedians.
Yes.
You know what?
Yes,
I would have
absolutely.
to absolutely.
Because now that I wanted to do that, and then which led to improv specials and make me laugh, and all these different things. So and I think that's just another part of his legacy.
Well, he was like one of the first comedians that had like an HBO special back in, way back in the
Yeah,
beginning.
I'm sure he is. I think Carlin certainly had it, but I didn't listen to Carlin, and my mom had a couple of comedy records, and then like every kid of the 70s, I had the Richard Pryor 8-track.
Yeah, Richard Pryor was another
that you
doorway
had to listen, without your brother and sister hearing, and and your uncles would go in your bedroom with you and shut the door and listen to it and laughing and looking uncomfortable at that. So anyway,
should I laugh? Should I laugh? No, I won't laugh.
Right.
Yeah. Did your mother know that you did that?
Yes, she did. Yes,
Okay.
they did. They were just surprised by it.
Yeah. It is a bit shocking at the time.
It was.
And Robin had sometimes he had a kind of a potty mouth too.
Yes, he did.
And some of his stand-up stuff.
Absolutely.
We're gonna miss him terribly.
Yes, he is. It is a sadder place without him, and
Sure.
so yes. So then we move on to something that I never really watched. Alf from 86 to 90. I got married in 84, was not spending as much time watching TV, doing things. And so I understood who Alf was, but it just never caught my interest enough to watch. So, I guess I saw an episode here or there.
Mhm.
And I got that the puppet was incredibly funny, but just not something in my wheelhouse. Dave, how about you?
I really did not give Alf as much time as, I know it's a very iconic thing of the 80s.
Yes.
And, it's much like, Max Headroom, where, you think 80s and Alf will come to mind.
Yes.
And I don't know, for some reason, Alf it didn't do it for me. When I watched the show, I don't know if it was one of those things where I just really didn't connect with, the actors or, the funniness of the show. So I never really got into it.
Okay. Lou, how about you?
Yeah, I think Dave hit it on the head. I did watch the show, but for me, it was always a bit of a grind because Alf, the Alf character was great. I mean, he's kind of like the Archie Bunker of aliens, right? But the human cast members were pretty bad.
Okay.
They were a chore to get through. So there was that the show didn't have that synergy between Alf and the rest of the cast, kind of like of All in the Family, where you had like Archie against Meathead and Gloria and Edith. This show didn't have that, and that's what it was missing. Otherwise, it would be a much better remembered show. Though I do have to say, if you ever catch the Elf Christmas special, I know it sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Okay.
Sort of like the
I'm listening.
Sort of like the Star Wars Christmas special, but it is actually a very touching piece of drama.
Hey, don't be dissing the Star Wars holiday special.
But the Elf Christmas special is a real heartstring tugger, and it's really well done.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
it's really well done.
I will have to try to find that. Okay, nice. And Scott, how about you? And
So
this is a safe zone. If you loved Alf, it's okay to tell us.
no, I wasn't huge on Alf. I mean,
Okay.
but I love the name Gordon Shumway. Just cracks me up.
Yeah.
I just think that's hysterical. It's a good name. So I see Elf, and I watched a couple quick episodes after we finished our last podcast because I wanted to catch up on it. Just remind me of what it was about, and I took away two things.
Okay.
Lou called him the Archie Bunker of aliens, and I see him more as the Rodney Dangerfield of aliens.
Okay.
I could see that.
And his hair is just like Donald Trump's. He's got this wicked brush comb over thing going on that's bouncing around all the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's an alien version of Donald Trump and Rodney Dangerfield.
You're gonna have to tweet that.
Yeah.
So it was I would call it mildly entertaining. It was definitely not loaded with laughs, other than the laugh tracks that they put behind it.
Yeah.
There was one kind of a weird scene that I saw between I can't remember the actor's name, but he was the main character, the dad or whatever.
That's right. I'm looking at IMDb. That's the only reason I know.
Yeah, and he's been in a bunch of stuff. He
has.
Actor in a lot of stuff. He and Alf actually played off each other pretty well.
Yeah.
A couple of scenes that I saw, I'm like, they're pretty good with each other. How do you play with a Muppet or whatever?
Yeah.
Alf was, I mean, so that's what he was, right? Basically.
Yeah, I kept waiting for Miss Piggy to show up.
Yeah.
Hiya!
That's interesting. And Alf is, he's been on. There's animated versions and the TV show, and it's just amazing, that the people loved him. So
Even had his own comic book.
yeah, there you go. Awesome. So I do not remember anything about Misfits of Science except wasn't Dean Martin's son one of the characters?
Yes, Dean
okay.
Paul Martin.
Okay.
He played the lead scientist,
Okay.
Dr. Billy Hayes.
Okay. Why don't you tell us about Misfits of Science?
Well, I was so expecting you to be leading in with the Courtney Cox, having the video with Bruce.
Yep.
Yes.
A little tie in there with set listing Bruce. For those that are listening that don't know that Jesse does that podcast, but this ties directly into that because
Max Wright was Dick Steffmeyer in this show. I'm looking at IMDb. I had forgotten Courtney Cox was on that. This is what she did before Friends, right?
Yeah. Yep. This was actually one of her first I want to say major TV gig. After she got kind of discovered from the Bruce video.
Mm-hmm.
So the story goes that she was trying to get to another TV show, and Misfits of Science was also casting at the same time, and she just decided to go in and try out for Misfits of Science and end up getting that, not the other show.
Oh, how funny!
Yeah, but a lot of people had seen her in the Dancing in the Dark video, and just kind of loved the way that she had the surprise, nervous, happy, but went along with it and get pulled up to the stage with Bruce. Mm-hmm. And then she kind of got sought after for a little while, but then she ended up with various roles until she landed finally with Friends.
Okay.
But yeah, the show itself, I was a big fan of this one. There was two scientists that were in there. There were Dr. Billy Hayes and another guy that was they called him L. It was Dr. Lincoln, big tall guy. I don't think Billy Hayes actually had any powers, but their group, they studied peoples with abilities, and they would kind of form this ragtag group where they would help people. And the premise was that they had this organization that they were trying to study things and help make things commercialize the abilities and whatnot for whatever purposes it was. It's been too long, but if I remember right, L was a very tall guy, and he could press part of the back of his neck and then shrink down to like inches. We had Johnny B. He's a guy that was able to shoot electricity from his hands and then run really fast, like a lightning bolt. So your precursor to Flash, I assume.
Okay.
And then Courtney Cox's character, they called her Glow. She had the ability of telekinesis. Those group worked together and got into just different adventures for basically 16 episodes before they got canceled.
I don't remember seeing any episode at all. So you liked it, so it worked for you?
Yes.
Okay.
After we got this on the books of what we were going to do, I had actually looked it up to try to see if I can go back and watch like the first episode. The only thing that I could find was like on YouTube, one of those things where you watch like the first 10 minutes and then it goes to the second part of the episode and then the third part of the episode. And it was just really badly done on YouTube, unfortunately. Okay. So I didn't really get to enjoy it as much as I did, but I got the premise of like the first maybe 20 to 30 minutes of the episode. It was the first pilot episode, and it had something to do with this. They called him the Iceman. And subsequently, they started traveling in a ice cream truck in the rest of the episodes. But they built on that because of that first episode with the Iceman. So it was really kind of fun. It was a fun series.
Okay, nice. So, Lou, how about you? Any memories or thoughts?
Not too many. I think either this was the subject of being against the show at the time that I liked better, or I think I might have watched an episode or two and thought it wasn't for me. So I have very little memories of this. It is kind of a kick looking at the cast list and seeing also Kevin Peter Hall, who of course went on to his most famous role as the Predator in the first Predator movie.
Right.
Come on, Harry and the Hendersons. He was more famous for that.
Okay.
Was he? Not for me. Not for me.
Nice.
Low joke, but yeah, he was Predator, but he was also Harry from Harry and the Hendersons.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. And Scott, how about you?
I do not remember this show at all, and it sounds like a fun show to watch. I mean, I wouldn't mind knowing.
So, I think, Lou, you brought up a great point. It is hard to remember this now, but, there was a time where you had to choose. I mean, I can remember, in 80s, getting our VCR, and I was amazed you could watch one channel and tape another because, you couldn't before. And, I'm just overwhelmed right now with our new system with FiOS. I can tape 4 shows and Linda's DVR can tape 4 shows, so there is never a conflict anymore. But yeah, there was it's against something I like already, so I'm not going to watch it. So
see this conversation though, it's like making me feel like it's Valley Girl all over again.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've had past episodes where we did movie reviews.
Yeah.
And I got dogged pretty hard for liking Valley Girl, and I was like the only kind of standing alone, And now here I've got this love affair for Misfits of Science, and you guys are like, yeah, well, never mind.
No, I really, it sounds like
all subjective.
Yeah, I think it sounds. I mean, let's get Josh Whedon to do this because he could have a lot of fun with this.
Oh,
Oh,
well, yeah, I think there's been a lot of iterations of this kind of show. Like just for me, most recently, it really reminds me of Alphas when I'm reading the premise.
Oh yeah, that's a really good idea.
That's another series that got canceled with a cliffhanger.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, no, that's
It's a less serious Heroes.
Yeah, and I love that. I I would like to get back to it. I'd love to see it. I do have memories of Voyagers. It was on like a Sunday at 6 p.m. or something, I remember. And I remember John Eric Huxham, previous to that, had been in some kind of model show. He was at afterwards. I don't remember, but I know. And this is really kind of looking back afterwards. This is kind of a Doctor Who-ish, that there's this whole people that have a series of this watch that they could use to go magically through time and such. And I remember liking it. And I remember David Letterman doing a joke about it where they had a little film part where he was talking to his friend and some kid, like Andy Griffin Opie scene. They're walking along a lane and, well, Voyagers wouldn't get canceled, would it, Dad? Or, and he was talking about how these things happen. And, I think it was a fun premise. I can remember them meeting Edison, right? And he had taken the magic watch apart. And I remember the scene going, don't touch anything. As long as you don't touch anything, I can put it back together. So I'm going to go backwards this time. Scott, how about you? Voyagers?
Don't recall it at all.
Okay, that was easy.
There's actually, like, towards the end of your list here, there's only a couple that I really remember.
I understand. Lou?
Yeah, I watched the show too, and it unfortunately, I just thought it was just sort of starting to hit its stride when the first season was canceled, and of course the whole John Eric Huxham, who went to star in Cover Up after this, ended on that whole kind of like Brandon Lee vibe with the being shot by fatally by a weapon with a blank. So it's kind of a sad end to this guy's career, and I thought he was pretty stiff at the beginning of the series, but I think he was starting to find his groove. And I like the boy. I don't know what else he's done, but Mino Pelusi, I thought he did a pretty good job. And I just love the name Phineas Fogg too. It sounds something like out of the Wild Wild West or something like that.
He was in the Amityville Horror in '79.
Yeah.
And he does not have anything since 2001 as a credit. So there we go. All right, Dave, is Voyagers another Misfits of Science for you?
It is not.
Okay.
It really didn't. It really didn't hit my radar. I mean, I do remember the watch. I remember the boy, but other than that, yeah, I don't really remember much of the series at all.
Okay. We'll move on then to Manimal. Now, I can tell you right now, I've seen not even a minute of this series.
You lucky soul.
Is that bad?
Oh yeah.
I know it's Glenn Larson, who has a wonderful pedigree, right?
Yep.
I don't even know. I'm trying to look. I don't even recognize anyone. The leads.
Oh, Simon McCorkindale. He's kind of like the Sean Bean of his time.
Okay, yeah, I see that. Once I see his face, I recognize him. Who wants to take lead on Manimal?
It's those crickets. Where are those cricket sounds again?
The show was for the dogs.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
All right.
The special effects just couldn't support the... if it was done today, I think it would sort of fit in with maybe somewhere like The Flash, but campier. But
yeah,
the special effects just weren't there, and it was just too clunky. The transition from his human appearance to the animal appearances, it was kind of like the old beef science fiction 50s movies where it took like 15 minutes to get from the spaceship down to the planet's surface.
Yeah,
it's just really slow and clunky.
And I guess they just didn't have the money because
that's right, and the technology.
I can remember, and I am not a fan of horror. I've been on the record about that, but I remember watching An American Werewolf in London on TV and was amazed at the special effects, right? That it showed for the first time him changing.
Mhm.
And we had the I'm a Pepper guy, being the lead. So so talk about an 80s reference, right?
That's good.
Thank you. So yeah, it didn't work. Okay. How about
hold on. I just
Yes?
did read that Manimal was ranked number 15 on the list of 50 worst TV shows of all time by
Damn,
TV Guide in 2002.
if it just tried a little bit harder, maybe they could have broke the top 10.
Exactly.
Okay, Small Wonders. Guys, I just pulled the list from IMDb. I once again, I don't think I've ever seen this. It looks like it was a sitcom. It lasted for 4 years, 85 to 89.
That's the biggest wonder about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. I know nothing about this show.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. The little robot girl, she talked like a robot.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it was just so poorly done. I can't believe it. I didn't even know it lasted 4 years. I mean, I remember I might have caught 5 minutes here and there if it was on TV or something, flipping through, but I couldn't even bear to watch it.
Dave,
No, I've got.
nothing either?
I've got nothing on this one.
So what I find funny is I'm here on IMDb, and there are 5 main actors. The cast. There's a Dick Christie, who was Ted Lawson, Marla Pennington, Joan Lawson, Jerry Serperin, who is Jamie Lawson, Tiffany Bissett, who is Vicky the Robot, and Emily Schulman, Harriet Brindle. Tiffany Bissett is the only one with a photo.
I know that. I was looking at that too.
The
That's
other
really
4 have done so little, or they care no little about their IMDb page. There is not even a picture of them. We will move on to, now we're talking classics, Power of Matthew Starr, with the great Lou Gossett, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember. Okay, so I worked at Acme Truck Line for about 4 years. And 2 or 3 of those, I was the night dispatcher. So I went to work at 6 at night, and I got off at 6 in the morning. And all I had to do was make sure if the phone rang, I answered it and called out the trucks that needed to be dispatched. Typed up a few invoices. They basically paid me to be there. And I would bring my 19-inch television that, it's this huge, massive TV from my house, plug it in with the antenna where you could catch the major, you could catch a couple of channels in Lake Charles, Louisiana. But on Fridays, the Powers of Matthew Starr, I watched, and I thought this thing was awesome. Anyone joining me?
I did not watch this show.
No.
I'm sorry to say.
Yeah. The only thing I remember about this show is that the lead actor looked a lot like Donny Osmond, and that's it.
Yes. Peter Barton. Yes, he had the. I guess he's spent 7 years on Young and Restless. He did a couple of years on Sunset Beach, Burke's Law. He was on. Lou Gossett Jr. was on this thing, and I love the premise that he was a prince that, because of a revolution, had been sent to Earth to be hidden till he became of age, so he could go back and get his take his rightful place, and on his planet. Lou Gossett was, his kind of mentor and protector. It probably sounds a lot better than it was, but I really liked that premise, and I thought it was interesting.
Now I'm curious because I just read this, and I want to get your feelings on it, Jesse.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise screen tested for this show.
Nice.
Wow.
Well, how would this show been different for you had you gotten it?
I think that could have been interesting. I don't remember much about the actual, lead character. So maybe I would remember more if it was Tom Cruise. Peter Barton was fine. Lou Gossett Jr. was somebody I really remember because there's he ends up telling, I think it's James Caron is the police or the military person that, and they kind of tell him what he is, and it's certainly not great, but I remember the premise enough that I liked it a lot.
Well, whatever the case, he's got some wicked 80s hair, man.
He has such 80s hair.
Absolutely.
It is such 80s hair.
I'm looking through some of the just a handful of photos here.
Yeah.
I got to get me that white stretchy suit that he's got. You can walk into a Halloween party with that bad boy on, and you're going to get looks.
And I got to tell you guys, I went through a period when I was younger. My mom and dad, I always had to have a crew cut. Dad was in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got old enough to have my hair a little bit longer, I was always someone who parted on the side. But I always wanted to be the guy that had hair parted in the middle.
That was me. I parted my hair in the middle.
I just thought that was a cool look. And there are a few photos where I did that for a while when I was out of high school. So in the late 70s, early 80s. And then I wised up because it didn't look good at all. But, I wanted that so bad. Oh.
But Scott, I'm with you. I'm looking at one of the photos on IMDb with, the white stretchy suit thing. And he's got this
a harpoon
thing he's holding. And I'm thinking it's totally 80s Aquaman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I do not have the body to cosplay this, but how cool if someone would cosplay Matthew Starr at a convention.
My God, that would be an excellent one. You'd be blowing people's minds.
Yeah, because they'd go, what? And you'd have to pull up a picture. It's kind of a couple of years ago for Halloween, I dressed up the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, Rob Ryan. And,
okay.
I had a blonde wig,
nice.
And I had, my Dallas Cowboy cap, and I had a Dallas Cowboy coach's shirt, and I ended up getting a playbook that had, remember one game he had this picture of a model on it, and so I had that playbook, and I cosplayed him, and no one knew who I was, but so I had to take a picture of see, so
wow. Now I'm looking at another picture here. He's only wearing one glove. Is that normal?
I remember nothing, but it looks like it. Yeah.
And I'm wondering.
Oh, and
did Michael Jackson watch this show?
I'm thinking yes.
Yep.
Because it's silver and sparkly.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Mm-hmm. We might have uncovered something that we didn't know about Mr. Jackson.
There we go.
He was a fan of Matthew Starr.
Mm-hmm. We move on to Amazing Stories from Steven Spielberg. This was a show that I think had mixed results. I think there were a couple of episodes that were absolutely amazing. For those of you who don't remember, it was an anthology series that they would do. I remember it being on Sunday nights, and they would have all-star casts, all-star directors and writers, and do these little stories, all of them with a twist. And we'll talk about Twilight Zone next, but just a science fiction bent. And some of them were absolutely amazing, and some of them weren't. But I think it was cool that they tried to do it. Dave, any thoughts or memories of Amazing Stories?
Really, the only thing that's coming to mind is I seem to remember the intro for it. Mm-hmm. At the beginning of the show, but I can't remember, like a specific episode to talk about.
Okay, it lasted 2 seasons.
Yeah,
and I think that mostly was because I don't think it got very good ratings. But Steven Spielberg, even back in '85, had enough power, to if they did an agreement, that it was a guaranteed 2 years. Lou?
Yeah, I agree. I think you summed it up pretty good, Jesse. I remember this series, of course, having Spielberg attached to it. this was supposed to be like the second coming of Rod Serling, and I think the first episode was about the Ghost Train.
I do remember that.
I always kind of liked it because that's the first time I ever heard the word OPA on a big network television show, because that's what we call our grandfathers, opas and omas. So that was kind of cool. But then it just never really seemed to find its legs after that. I remember the next episode was about the guy that could, high school guy that started attracting all these pieces of metal to him, becomes like a human magnet. And then that just kind of got progressively weirder. They had that one about the B-17 bomber that couldn't land because its landing gear had been blown out, and one of the crew members was a cartoonist, and so through the power of his imagination, they were able to draw a cartoon wheel on the bomber, and it landed safely. And I think a lot of people go and like, what? Like, I think it would sell better today, but back then I think that was still kind of pushing it. And
I remember that episode a lot. It was really good.
Yeah. So it was a mixed bag. There's definitely worth checking out if you can find the list of the top episodes. There's some pretty good people associated with this anthology series, kind of like Twilight Zone or Outer Limits. If you go through the list of all the shows, you're going to find some real gems in there. But I did watch it, but it never had the consistency of the other series.
No, I think you named one of the best ones. Is that the one set in World War II, and that was pretty cool. Moving on to the Twilight Zone, the 80s version. Now, I do remember this and have a lot of fondness with this. I think partly because Rockne O'Banion from Farscape wrote 27 episodes. J. Michael Straczynski wrote 12 from Babylon 5. Harlan Ellison wrote 5 episodes. George R. Martin from Game of Thrones wrote 5 episodes. I remember, and not all of these were classic Twilight Zone, where a shock ending, and they weren't as hard driven, but there were just some really clever stories. Wes Craven, rest in peace, directed 5 episodes. I'm looking at this, and there are episodes. One of my favorites was the one that an Elvis impersonator goes back in time and meets Elvis before he becomes famous, and accidentally kills him.
Ooh.
And becomes, so he lives that life.
Oh, cool.
Even knowing how it was going to end.
Right.
Because, and it's a very bittersweet kind of, episode. I think there was a take on the Arthur legends. This is, and every once in a while they re-show them on the Sci-Fi channel, and I will record them and really, really like them. Anyone else?
I think there's a man on the wing.
No, that's the classic.
I know.
Yeah, in the movie.
Yeah, I know, but I had to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Nothing going on here. Everybody's fine. Okay. How are you?
And I remember, I'm looking now, I remember the Children's Zoo, which was a really creepy episode where the kids take the parents to the zoo, and the parents are put aside, and the kid keeps walking through, and they find another parents that go, "We've learned our lesson. We're not going to ignore you. We're going to be better." And so the kid adopts these 2 new parents, and his original parents are sitting there in the zoo. That was amazing. Shatterday is one of my favorite Harlan Ellison short stories, and Bruce Willis starred in that one. This is worth digging up and finding. It is really, really good stuff. I mean, not all of them are gems, but a lot of them are.
This was on during a time right when I was a senior in high school and just out of high school.
Yeah.
And I do not remember watching a lot of these shows that are on the list of that era, like those couple of years. And I just think I was too consumed with being out and having fun and stuff. So I think I missed out on a lot of these shows. Now, I mean, the Twilight Zone, I have a hard time getting anything out of the Twilight Zone, other than when it was black and white with Rod Serling.
The Elvis one is called The Once and Future King.
Okay.
And it is definitely worth looking for. It is good. So, Dave, how about you? Yeah, The Once and Future King.
Yeah, I was joking about the original series. I mean, I definitely remember getting on the Tower of Terror ride based off the Twilight Zone.
Yes.
Universal Studios. My son absolutely loved that ride, and of course, I was, scared for my life, but it's all good.
Okay.
But no, I mean, I seem to remember there was an episode in the Twilight Zone, and I want to say it was the 80s series, where there was like a Vietnam vet that was afraid to go to sleep.
Oh, that's from the original, I think.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm crossing the streams.
Yeah. No, it's quite easy to do because I'm looking at this too, and because of the older series and the other series that came later in the 2000s, I think this is really hard for me to separate out from all those various versions. I do remember the Bruce Willis one because I am too. I'm a big Harley and Ellison fan, and Saturday. I know there's an episode with Charles Martin Smith that I thought was really good, but in general, I'm going to have to revisit this series because I've forgotten a lot of this. I'm just sort of scrolling through all the actors that were on this series, and it's pretty amazing. So, if nothing else, doing this podcast, it's definitely made me want to revisit this 80s version because I've really can't separate it now from the 2000 version.
And Dead Run is another one that a trucker ends up accepting a job and he takes people to hell. And that's really an interesting take. And then Profile in Silver is preventing the assassination of President Kennedy. So and some really neat stuff. So I would. This is worth checking out and looking for. Okay, so I'm gonna sound like Scott here, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I got married in '82. I mean '84. I met Linda in 1980, and I got home. I remembered to watch Hill Street Blues, because back then you couldn't tape stuff. So I loved watching Hill Street Blues. That was one of my favorite shows, but I never found time for Knight Rider. So I don't remember. And and this was a cultural, talk about a cultural icon, and still is, right?
It's the Hoff. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I absolutely, Edward Mulhare was the ghost of Mrs. Muir to me. So, and and so Captain Daniel Gregg, and so it was cool to see him. And then, someone open up a window from 1776 was the voice of Kit. And why am I drawing a blank of his name?
William Daniels.
Yes, thank you.
He was also on Saint Elsewhere.
Yes, he was. But I think that was one of the greatest jokes ever. Is his real wife played his wife on the show, and they're in Philadelphia, and she says whatever his name was on the show, "You never sing to me. I love you singing," and he starts singing from 1776, which he was on their Broadway. It's hot as hell in Philadelphia. And it was like, that is such a great in joke. So someone else will have to talk about David Hasselhoff, talk about an icon of the 80s. Go for it. Who wants to go first?
What can you say? I mean, that car, the Cylon flashing radar in the front grille, the voice of the car, the music, that dun 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 dun.
Yeah, exactly. That opening sequence in
Richard Basehart from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea did the narration.
Oh my God, that's so iconic for the opening.
Yeah, just a really fun show. It was just a blast.
I remember watching episodes here and there, but I was never hooked into it like a series. Sometimes you want to see what's going to happen next week, but I don't remember ever thinking that way with this. But it was a fun show. It's who wouldn't want a car that's kind of a robot for you, that's is fighting crime basically.
But do you ever notice that as you've gotten older, the reason why you want, the iconic type of vehicles that have these like superpowers and all that become more practical than when you were a kid? I mean, when you were a kid, you were like, oh, it's going to go into super pursuit mode, and it's going to be able to jump and, fly and, do all these cool things. But now I'm at the age where if I have a car like that, I'm like, well, good. It'll drive me to work. I'll be able to, just read or something.
Yeah. It's eerie how much of that then fanciful technology is almost standard, part of the standard package of most cars nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting pretty close to that.
Yeah.
I don't know if have they, I mean, other than your GPS talking to you, do they have cars that are like talking to you?
So Linda's new car doesn't talk to us, but it does. It won't let you change the GPS while you're driving.
Oh, okay.
It will. It tells you if you get too close to a car, and it beeps if you get out of the lane. Like, how if you're drifting and you get out of your lane,
wow,
it beeps at you. And like Linda says, this car is obsessed in keeping me safe. So.
But the evil version of Kit, which is called Car, KRR, was voiced by actor Peter Cullen, who is also Optimus Prime.
Right.
Nice.
Nice.
So yeah, definitely some good 80s love right there.
Yeah.
Very good. Anything else about Knight Rider?
I feel like we should be talking about this one as much as we talked about like Mork and Mindy, but I don't think we have that.
Yeah, I don't. Though I do know that a funny story about Hasselhoff. Back in when the Mavericks were on their playoff run and where they won their NBA championship, Dirk Nowitzki, who is from Germany, mentioned casually that he was thinking during one of the shows this David Hasselhoff song, and I don't even remember the song, and it somehow got spun that he was this huge David Hasselhoff fan, and so the Hoff showed up at playoff games and people were doing signs and everything, and I guess because he's Hasselhoff is huge in Germany, and Dirk was like, yeah, I'm not that big of a fan. It was just that an earworm in his ear. So there we give a little extra time to him.
Well, that whole thing about Germany, that's hysterical to me. You saw the movie Dodgeball, I take it?
Yes.
Okay. They had a little love for the Hoff in that one too. One of the dodgeball teams was the German team, and they had a picture of David Hasselhoff that they all put their hands on before the game. It's kind of a strange little thing of how popular he became in kind of an obscure place, really. You don't think of people being extremely famous in Germany. It's just not, other than like German rock bands like the Scorpions or something, but
that's where the Beatles started.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. So anyway,
not that I'm saying that the Hoff is on that level.
Yes.
But.
Yes.
Well, to some people,
those crazy Germans.
Now we turn on to Believe It or Not, I'm Walking on Air. Greatest American Hero. And I realize this was not a great show,
nope.
but
I love it.
Connie Celica was so beautiful.
Yeah.
William Catt was so charming.
The theme song was awesome.
The theme song was
the
amazing.
bumbling superhero. How can you not like the bumbling superhero?
Robert Culp was
awesome.
Just perfect because he was so had such a typecast and I Spy and and he was just perfect. And I remember the first time I ever called a TV station, and I had no idea. It was the episode in the first season where they had, and I don't remember which one, but one of the My Heroes Have Always Been Cowboys, and one of the actors who had played the Lone Ranger, John Hart, guest starred, and I could remember, Ralph going, "I grew up on this guy. I grew up on this guy," and having that hero worship. And, and they played the Willie Nelson's "My Heroes Have Always Been Cowboys." Yeah. And I actually looked up the AB Silly affiliate's phone number, dialed long distance to say how much I loved that episode. And the person answering the phone's like, "Okay," but and I don't know if the show would hold up, but I just love this thing.
Same here.
Luke, go ahead.
Yeah, it was, it's got that underdog element to it that I just loved. And to me, this was as close at that time as we'd ever gotten to like what I wanted as the same vibe for like a Spider-Man live action TV series. The down on the luck guy that has this power that he doesn't really control, and he's trying to do good, but he just he does it, but he's not cool at it. But he's just such a decent guy, and the chemistry of the cast was fantastic, and their chemistry and the theme song really carried the show probably for a season or two longer than it really deserved to go, because unfortunately the writing was not really there. And this is again another show that could really be redone quite well today. And I'll just never forget that one episode where the alien spaceship came back and they got the instruction manual again, and then he shrunk down, and when he shrunk back up, he forgot to bring the manual with him again. I just thought, that's just so typical Ralph. I really have fond memories of this show. It was really appealed to my genetic makeup, even though it wasn't that great. But a lot of fond memories about this show.
Dave, how about you?
Yeah, a lot of the great memories, around, obviously the iconic theme song. I love the whole premise of the bumbling superhero, and it's as simple as just losing the manual. I mean, that is just classic. I don't think we've seen that premise done or replicated. You've got people, that don't understand their powers, are still learning to control them, but the whole premise around, well, we just misplaced the instruction booklet. I mean, that's just classic, and that's what this thing does. Is it just so iconic from the 80s just for that reason alone.
And they actually, Connie ended up being in a hotel later, and she was absolutely beautiful. But like they were aware enough to say, "I'm here for more than just the Lois Lane jokes." And it just really self-aware and didn't take itself too serious. I do think that if you had in modern climate with a better writing staff, and especially if you could have thrown in a like Fringe, where you had a season-long arc, but you also were doing well on individual episodes. Yeah. I mean, that could really rock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Scott, how about you?
Surprisingly, I did not really watch this, and I know I was with my family a lot of that.
Yeah.
My dad and mom, and my brother and sister would sit around and watch TV at night after dinner or whatever. But I don't remember us ever getting into this show. The only connection, I always confuse it, and I can never keep the two titles straight, was a movie with John Ritter called Hero at Large. So I always,
which is not a bad movie with great Ann Archer.
I love the movie, and it's something that I remember seeing, just the movie. But and actually, if you look at it, his costume from Hero at Large, looks kind of like,
absolutely
looks a lot like the Greatest American Hero.
And then William Catt ended up spending a lot of years in the Perry Mason,
Yeah.
series, and I think he does a few conventions every once in a while. I would probably embarrass myself if I went and saw him. I grew up on you, man.
You would be the first, I'm sure.
But it is, and Stephen J. Cannell, who is a who's who of TV show creations, and Lou, I think you brought up a good point. As fans of Star Trek, and I grew up reading comic books, and the Super Friends, and we were desperate for anything.
Yeah.
And this was, they seemed to have fun with it, but they didn't make it stupid.
Yeah.
They seemed to respect their viewers.
Yeah.
And so
there was just something so appealing about watching this guy trying to fly. Like, it was
Yes.
just, he was all over the place, crashing in the walls. And after, we just seen the Richard Donner Superman movies where he's flying so coolly and
Yes.
collectively. And this guy was just all over the place like a drunk elephant. It was great.
Yeah, just didn't even know how to put the brakes on, so he ended up like breaking more than he, doing more damage. Yeah, it was very well done from a quirky superhero standpoint.
Yeah.
Okay, so I figured out what I was watching.
Okay.
I was watching with the family, Real People, and That's Incredible.
Well, yes,
Okay.
that was crazy back then.
And those were the same years that show was on. So I'm guessing it was probably opposite that show.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
So
Makes
anyway,
sense. So that is the last show I have on my agenda. Did I miss any?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I got two.
All right.
It's two, and they're both alien shows.
Okay.
One is based on a John Carpenter movie that starred Jeff Bridges, and it is Starman. And that starred Robert Hayes from the Airplane movies. And that was a show that my family, we watched together. My mom was a real big fan of that show, so I have a lot of great memories of that show. It didn't last very long. And the other one has a Star Trek connection, and it's from the Star Trek Wrath of Khan. Khan's first in command, I guess you could say, whose name was in the movie was Joachim. The actor's name was Judson Scott, and he played a character for one season, also another alien landing on Earth called the Phoenix. It was a fairly cool show too. It sort of had some sort of Aztec vibe to it. He sort of got his power from the sun. And it didn't last very long either, but I also remember that show. And I'll just put a plug for another one that's not really science fiction, but it is such, it is one of the iconic portrayals of the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle character, which would be the 1980s BBC's Sherlock Holmes with Jeremy Brett. If you haven't seen it, go out and get it. It's on Blu-ray. Just a fantastic series and one of the, still probably the iconic portrayal of that character. I put him up there with Basil Rathbone and above Benedict Cumberbatch.
All right, well, honorable mentions got to go to the Incredible Hulk. Because that was on from 78 to 82.
Oh my God, how could we forget that one?
Yeah, so we got to have Bill Bixby, Dr. David Banner. Yeah, that...
I'm so glad you brought that up. I love that show.
I definitely, that's definitely a show that we watched. That was a lot of fun. I could not wait for the next episode. Yeah. And then the one with Bigfoot and just I remember going to Universal Studios out in California had that spinning tunnel.
Oh yes. Yeah.
From that.
Yeah. I think they used that in the $6 Million Man too, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, that's right. No, that's what it was.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wasn't there a Hulk and Bigfoot too? Or Bigfoot and the Hulk? Or was that just $6 Million Man?
Could have been. But yeah, Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, they were just awesome on that show. The episode where he runs into another guy that's sort of done the same experiment as him and destroys the antidote. Oh, that just broke my heart. And the other one with the psychic who gave him a hug at the end of the episode, and she cried a little bit because she knew what was in store for him. Bill Bixby just brought such a sense of dignity to that role. And of course, the closing theme song, the Lonely Man, the on the road piano song was just fantastic as well.
And then Lou Ferrigno, I mean, he's at like every single comic book show that it's like in creation. He's always there. So
yeah, he was doing the acting gig before Schwarzenegger did.
Yeah, and it certainly was in a lot of ways, for a comic book fan, it would be ripped today, right, on the internet because it's got nothing to do with the core, and that they've kind of ignored the reference points and everything. But at the time, it was so cool.
Yeah.
And then I am, ever since Courtship of Eddie's Father. Bill
the Magician.
Bixby, the Magician. He was so cool, and he did give a sense of, sadness and beaten down. And you're right. I mean, we made the joke about Cujo being so, wonderful and so iconic that the word to describe a out of control beast is Cujo. But how many times have you said key, sad, walking away music, for the Hulk? When someone's talking about, something that, when they're feeling defeated or something. So absolutely amazing. Good. I can't believe we missed that one.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
Good save.
Yeah.
We got a lot of letters about that.
Yes, we would. So Dave, if we missed something, wait a minute. Before we do, could you narrow it down to a couple, 2 or 3? I mean, I would say probably Quantum Leap is one of my favorites. I truly love Alien Nation, and I'd go Greatest American Hero or Twilight Zone if I had to. I'd probably go Greatest American Hero, but I think Twilight Zone was a better series. So how about you guys? If you throw in your, science fiction TV in the 80s, what would you do? Your top 3 or 4? And Lou, we'll go with you first.
Ooh, pressure. Well, Quantum Leap, definitely. After that, the other picks will be more sentimental ones rather than the quality of the show. So
right.
I'm going to have to go with Greatest American Hero and Knight Rider.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, nice. Dave, how about you? And I know, Dave, just to give you, listener, a little... See, Dave hates when we have to do this because he's like, I can't narrow it down to just a few.
No, actually, looking at the list, I actually do have it down to 4.
Okay.
So I'm going Greatest American Hero.
Yes.
Misfits of Science.
Okay.
V.
Ooh, good choice.
And then Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah, and I thought about The Next Generation, and I think of that more as the 90s, though that's not fair. And I almost think it's in another category, but yeah, well done. All right, and Scott, how about you?
I'm going to have to go... My ultimate favorite of that era, of that list, is definitely Alien Nation. I love that show.
Yeah, me too. You right there.
And V would probably be a close second.
Yes.
And then the third would kind of be between Buck Rogers and Mork and Mindy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what about Small Wonder too, of course.
Oh. Oh, well done, sir. Well done. We've got to find another topic to talk about. I don't know if anyone loves listening to this, but I have a blast with the 3 of you just talking about this, and we all commit to a different thing, and like, yep, hadn't seen it. So we've got to find another topic. Dave, you want to tell us how they can reach us if we forgot something, or if they have a suggestion for another topic?
Well, actually, before we jump into that, we got some Twitter shout-outs.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
Mr. K at Zombies Ate My Dalek.
Nice.
Says, Greatest American Hero, ! Used to be on with a show called Otherworld over here, which I thought was amazing till I rewatched it last week. So Otherworld I'm not familiar with, but I can see that being, you rewatch something from back then and you go, why did I like this again? That's kind of how I feel about Dukes of Hazzard now.
So I, a few years ago, Linda was going to be out of town, and I still had a disc, Netflix account where they would ship you discs, and before they had on demand, and I got Underdog. And I was like, okay, there's no wife. I'm just going to get, something, fat to eat, and I'm going to watch Underdog because I loved Underdog as a kid. Wally Cox, Sweet Polly. And I was like, after one episode, I'm like, this is horrible. And I felt so... a part of my youth had gone away. I think it was just so sad. So anyway, continue on, Dave.
Yeah, and actually, I've got a friend of mine who I used to work with, but he went on to another job. He's a big Underdog fan. Right now, he's going through kind of resurgence of, getting together all the collectibles. So I think he's on the other side of that spectrum where he's like, reliving those moments as a kid. And like loving the series even now. So it's interesting.
I might have to try again with clear eyes. In other words, I know it's it won't have that shine that it did.
Right.
When I remembered. So okay, that's interesting. Okay.
The other Twitter shout out we've got is actually co-host Matt McLean.
Yay!
So it's at Matt McLean, and he says Automan. So did anybody watch that one?
No, I'm trying to look it up as we talk. I don't know that one.
Well, he actually did another tweet too. So he brought out the powers of Matthew Starr. Okay. And he says, I wonder why I like that show, ...
Desi Arnaz Jr. starred Automan with Chuck Wagner. And I know nothing. Heather McNair, whoever that is. She has no picture again. I don't remember anything of this, though. I always thought Desi Arnaz Jr. was very cool.
Yeah. Oh, Patrick McNee was in this show, too.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah, I kind of vaguely remember this, and it's another... Looks like Glenn Larson was involved with this as well. Yes. So there you go. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So then what was the premise of this show?
It's kind of like a Max Headroom kind of character. Automan, Automatic Man. Oh, I thought it was a holographic car.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all we have on Twitter.
Okay, good. How can we reach you? How can we reach us?
Take care of the 80s Reboot Twitter account, so that's at 80s Reboot. We also got the Facebook, so that's facebook.com/80s Reboot. We got Tumblr, 80s Reboot, tumblr.com. And we also got an email address now, so it's 80sreboot@gmail.com.
Very good.
Pretty much just anything with 80s Reboot, and then put the extension on it, and it's us.
Okay. And Scott, how about yourself?
I'm at Scott's Eye on Twitter and Scott Compton Photography on Facebook.
And I don't think I said this officially while we were recording. Great episode about heavy metal in the 80s.
Thank you very much.
Very proud of you. You guys should go check that out.
Yeah, that was an awesome episode.
Yes. Lou, how about yourself?
I'm on Twitter at Lou, L-O-U-W, Sytsma, S-Y-T-S-M-A. And you can find me podcasting also at the Stephen King podcast over at Lilia's Library.
Yes, they are. You're kind of going through some of the books again, right? Yes.
Yep. And our next episode will be episode 50.
And you don't have to talk about Under the Dome anymore.
Well, we haven't done our last thoughts on it yet.
Oh,
thank
okay.
God.
Yes. Yeah, that was really interesting.
So bad, it's good.
Yes, it is. I totally agree.
The cool thing about it is made me retroactively appreciate Haven a lot more.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Haven, and so I'm excited about that coming back. But that isn't the purpose of this episode.
Nope.
Though, if you have not listened to Lou guest starring with us and talking Stephen King books and movies of the 80s, please do, because that was a lot of fun and full of great information.
Yeah, I got to say, Lou, I listened to the, what is it called? Pulling the Double Night Shift?
Oh yes.
today, and that
Oh,
was
yeah.
that was an awesome episode. I loved it, man.
Yeah,
It
that
very
was
good.
his kind of his 70s, 80s short story collection. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent, and one of my favorite of his altogether. So very good
Ah,
stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
Everybody should go check it out for sure.
absolutely.
Thank you very
And
much.
and I am at Jesse Jackson DFW. The talking of 80s spin-offs, uh, my spin-off podcast, because, and you guys are tired of hearing the story, but it's true. We did an episode of Bruce Springsteen in the 80s for this podcast, and I had so much fun. I convinced Rob to let me do a Bruce Springsteen podcast called at Set Lusting Bruce, having different fans of Bruce Springsteen join me and we talk. And I'm doing a Pearl Jam episode next week, and I'm going to try to convince Scott to come on, and we're going to talk about heavy metal maybe and how his obsession. And Dave may want to talk about a little George Strait.
Yep.
So I think that's going to be fun. So
Completely out of the 80s wheelhouse there. But yes.
but but it's in the music wheelhouse. So
Yes, exactly.
I think that's all we've got. How long did we go?
Hour and 40.
Hour 40, yes.
That's it. Huh?
It is just awesome. So
It goes so fast too. You don't
It
realize
does.
how all of a sudden I look up at the timer and it's like over an hour. I'm like, wow, that one flew by.
So Dave, you want to take us out?
Well, I mean, we just want to thank everybody for reliving the 80s with us. So thanks for joining.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.